we had a client who is a widow, and she has, I'm going to say about 6,000, a little over 6,000 acres that she owns, and it's all paid for. She spent a lot of money. She probably spent $150,000 on her accountant, but he saved her $7.5 million in tax. And she was smart enough to say, hey, how about if I write you a check for another 150, can you save me another $7 million in tax?
On today's episode of the Peddler Perspective, we welcome our guest, Jeff Mollet. Jeff Mollet is an attorney who's focused on bankruptcy, banking and financing, real estate, agribusiness. With deep roots in agriculture, Jeff works extensively with farmers, ag lenders, rural businesses on legal and financial issues that impact agricultural operations. He's especially known for his work with agribusiness communities, including cooperative formation, agricultural finance, and projects like biofuels, meat processing, and grain marketing. He's also a frequent speaker and published author, has written more than 100 articles, and has been a longtime leader in agricultural law, education, and professional organizations. Welcome to the Peddler Perspective, Jeff.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. That's a long introduction, but I do appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's one of those things that basically from everybody thing that I've ever heard is that whenever we talk about ag law, your name is one of those that comes up. And as far as in my world, and I've been in ag here as far as with real estate for a little over 11 years, and my wife's been at it for 20 something years, that I know that she's always leaned on you in the past as the go-to person was what's going on with ag. But if you could, can you give us some of the background on how you're connected to the agricultural?
Well, grew up on a farm here in Bond County. Family's been here for 175 years in this location. And so it's kind of in my blood. Decided probably wasn't a good idea to try to become a farmer per se, because I graduated in 1982 at the height of the farm crisis. And my father and grandmother said, you're not going to farm. So decided to do something different, went to college, was going to be an architect and an engineer, decided I didn't like math that much. And my advisor, God bless him, directed me towards law degree, went to St. Louis University and graduated with an altruistic idea to say I want to try to help the farm economy that I just had seen go through so much trouble. So I've just been kind of diligently working to get as much information and knowledge and experience as I could on farm issues, legal issues, and to try to, get a perspective that is necessary to help the clients. And so far it's worked out relatively well. And but I had actually colored hair when this started, so that tells you how that's gone.
And it didn't come from the wife. So actually it came from the business.
This is all from practicing law.
All from practicing law. And then basically, so it sounds exciting. I mean, with the 175 years, you're getting close to that bicentennial farm. There's not many of those around.
Yeah, it would be, except for the fact that they moved from a farm to a different farm. So we've only been on the current farm for about 95 years. So we can't tack them together. So we don't have a nice, pretty centennial farm sign. But there are a lot of them in Bond County here. And in this area, they had a special area at the fair this year. And it was amazing how many centennial and sesquicentennial type farms there were in this county.
Yeah, and like I say, and that's the big thing about it is keeping these families on the farms and keeping the farms going. So
agreed.
Yeah. It's so was there a moment in your early career that you wanted to focus more on the rural communities?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I really thought that was kind of going to be the way I wanted to go. One of the purposes for going to law school was to be able to help people. Which sounds weird because lawyers are typically known as the people that stir things up some, but I wanted to be a business lawyer. I wanted to help the agricultural community. And when I had the opportunity at a firm I worked for right out of school to go to work with the attorneys at Growmark and IAAA up in Bloomington, I took that opportunity. And as a result of that, I worked with Jim Anderson and Mr. Harmon and Jerry Quick and those guys who are sort of legends in the agricultural law industry in the field. And they were very generous with their time and knowledge and helped me, kind of get a foothold in the agribusiness law world here. And that's really been the way I got to where I'm at.
Was there any big
Well,
surprise for you as far as like, as you were a young person and you had an eager mind coming into this, that you were going to do that? Was there any like big ahas from being that young man coming in to that now understanding a different perspective of law?
I don't know that there was any, watershed moment or event that occurred. I will say that it was a little more difficult than I had thought, because there really were only, and there probably still are only 4 or 5 lawyers who you would really call just agricultural guys in Illinois. And it's getting harder to find those people because, farm boys and farm girls, they don't necessarily want to go to law school, or they don't want to come back and practice in the rural communities. So that was really my thing, was all of a sudden I noticed that the practice was going to be wide open because nobody else was doing it anymore. And that probably happened about 25 years ago, when there was kind of a drain of lawyers and young lawyers from the rural communities, to the point that, the Bar Association does a study, and I think there are some rural communities that don't even have lawyers in them anymore. So there might be an entire county, especially in Southern Illinois, where there may be 0, 1, maybe 2 lawyers in the whole county. So that was a big change for me to understand that there's really nobody to deal with in these areas.
So since you're on that topic, I mean, that is one of those that we have conversations with many different lawyers that we deal with, is that there aren't enough new attorneys coming in to service the areas. That's kind of what we're hearing. And as people are aging out and retiring and going down that path. And the other things, what's really interesting that we're seeing is that a lot of our attorneys are becoming prosecuting judges, things to that effect, because there's just not enough in the food chain. What are you seeing? I mean, are you seeing the same thing? Is there a fix to that?
We're seeing the exact same thing. One of the reasons I just moved to a new firm, we were discussing earlier, I had moved to Lashley and Bear, which is a 100-plus-year-old firm in St. Louis. One of the reasons I did that is because obviously I'm getting old, as you can see from the look here, but it's impossible to find lawyers to take the place of the lawyers who are retiring. My daughter works with me. She's been a lawyer for 8 years. I've got a young man who moved from Chicago down this direction who's joined the firm, but we need 2 or 3 more lawyers just at our firm. That is a common perspective throughout Southern Illinois and probably even the rural areas across the country. There's just, and it sounds crazy, but there's not enough lawyers who want to work in those types of situations, because either a lifestyle that they don't think they want to live, or they don't think they can make enough money, or whatever their reasoning might be. So solving that's going to be very difficult. The Bar Association has created a rural initiative to try to match lawyers from the various law schools in Illinois with law firms who are looking for people. And that has at least started the process of people thinking about, well, could I get into a rural practice, and might it not be a better lifestyle once I understand what they're doing, and that when you go to the convenience store in town, a couple people, and things are a little more relaxed and laid back, and overall you may have as good a lifestyle and not need quite as much money to become a rural lawyer.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, because as I talked to some of the older attorneys, is that they couldn't get people to take them in whenever they graduated from law school. They some of them had to even start their own firms just because the old guard would not bring in new people to train their competition. And
yeah, that was when I was in law school long enough ago that I don't even want to admit it. We were riding the crest of the LA Law TV show. And at that time, that was the popular thing. Everybody kind of wanted to go to law school and do that. And as a result, there literally were probably too many lawyers at that time graduating law school. So it was far more difficult than it is today to find a job in the legal field. And a lot of people that I know, a lot of friends I have that went to law school, didn't even practice law. They just decided to do something different, but used the law degree as a mechanism to help them get a different job in a different field.
Wow. Like I say, that's what we hear that echoed in a lot of different fields that we have today. We have more people in the United States, but yet, but like I say, there's not enough people to fill some of the careers that we have. So, if you would, can you go through some of the articles that you've written? So, some of those that stand out to you and that were really important and have sincerity and real meaning to yourself.
Sure. I was told by a wise partner at a firm I worked with named Bob Brugge years ago, who's a well-known area lawyer as well, that if you wanted to become an expert in something or be perceived as an expert, you just needed to make yourself known to the world. And the way you do that is to go speak about things and to write about things. So I took him up on that and just started writing articles. I was when I was in law school, I was a member of the initial Young Lawyers Bar Committee for the Illinois State Bar Association, and that gave me a little bit of access to people who needed articles for their newsletters and things like that. So I had an advantage in that respect, that I would be able to write articles about local government things that we were working on, or agribusiness matters, or contracts, employment law type things that would easily be able to get published, because quite frankly, most lawyers didn't have time to write those things. And as a young lawyer with nothing to do, I had time to do it. So I just kind of got in the habit of doing that. And that led to being on the Illinois State Bar Agricultural Law Section Council, where I became the newsletter editor. And then once I was the editor, it's pretty easy to get my stuff printed.
That's
As long as I could
the way
look
to
in the
look
mirror
at
and
that.
agree
If
with
you wanted
myself,
to
I
have,
was in
if
pretty
you,
good shape. And from that perspective, I just kind of started writing about things that either were topics of the day, that were new issues, or that were items that I thought somebody needed to know about. So a couple things I do is, one, I like humor, as you guys have kind of noticed here, perhaps. So I will come up with various titles. So one of them I came up with was using spaghetti westerns to describe XYZ law thing. So I would compare law things to Clint Eastwood movies, which was kind of fun. I did write a big article on agricultural cooperatives and how you organize and start a new one, because that was kind of the big thing, trying to figure out how to do that. I was lucky enough to get that picked up, and I had to go to Colorado to speak at the National Ag Law Symposium about that, and that was a lot of fun and a lot of learning experience. But overall, I really don't have favorite articles. I just kind of try to write about topics that are interesting, things that I've discovered, or things that I've discovered that are something I didn't know, and I thought maybe a lot of lawyers didn't know, because there are, as you might suspect, some unusual things in the law that when they pop up, it will surprise you. And I don't like surprises.
right. Yep. So the questions that say that, what are some signs farming and agribusiness should watch for, and signals that whenever it comes to getting professional help?
Well, I've noticed over the years, I'm a farm boy too, so I don't like to spend any money that I don't need to spend.
That's the way that works.
But recognizing, although you see behind me, we probably spend too much money on toys in this house. But recognizing when you need help is kind of the key. And I've had a lot of clients that are coming to me over the years to say, I need you to help me on this. I'm over my head, or I don't know. Those are the kind of situations that I admire, because admitting you don't know something and trying to get some help is the best thing you could do to avoid a problem in the future, versus making a decision and then trying to undo it. A good example of that is recently we've had these solar and wind contracts floating around. People will get something in the mail, they'll look at it and say, oh, that sounds like a good deal, it's a lot of money, and they will sign it and send it back.
Whoa, no, really?
Pardon?
That actually happens?
That happens, and they will come to the office 6 months later and say, hey, could you look at this and tell me what it says?
Oh,
And I'm
no.
like, well, I don't know it says what it says, but you've already signed it. They want to get out of it. There's no such thing. Those are the kinds of things that I hope to try to avoid by doing the speaking to groups and the articles and talking with other lawyers, is to make the public know that it's not that expensive per se to hire a lawyer when you can have a lawyer look at a contract that maybe costs you $500. I don't want to price other people's work, but you can usually get something reviewed relatively cheaply versus signing a document that you don't want to be bound to or that you wish you hadn't signed. So in that respect, one of the big things that I try to counsel clients on is call the office. I'm willing to work with people, and I think most rural lawyers are willing to work with people to try to help them avoid problems, because we got enough other stuff to do generally that we don't need to cause problems. We try to solve them.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then as that brings that up, I mean, since you did bring up the solar leases and things to that effect, that's one of mine interesting things is trying to understand is what are some big issues inside of those leases that the solar companies put in, and then some of those that are actually negotiable. So those kind of the big key things saying, okay, because that's one of those I've never reviewed a solar lease. I've had a lot of discussions about solar leases, but again, that would be something we would definitely go back and say, here, you need to take this to an attorney to review. But what's some of the things that are in there that people don't realize that they find out later?
Okay. Yeah. So I've probably read a couple hundred at least of these solar contracts from probably 100 different companies. So there's a lot of different documents floating around, but there are some common themes. And some of the common themes are where the dangerous parts of these contracts are if you don't understand what you're being asked to sign. One of them is they always say, well, when this project is decommissioned and the solar field is no longer able to be profitable, we will remove it and restore your land to the best extent possible type of language. And we've even got what's called the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement, or an AIMA, which the state of Illinois, in conjunction with our bar committee and the Department of Ag here in Illinois, has come up with, which is an agreement that says this is how you restore the land and this is how you should treat it. Those two documents, that AIMA and these documents that are coming from these companies, are intended to provide a framework for decommissioning. And the problem with that is the company can always use the bankruptcy code in the United States to simply walk away from these projects. So whether they say they're going to provide a bond, or they're going to clean the property up, or they're going to do X, Y, or Z, there's no way to guarantee that's going to happen. There's just literally no way to guarantee that. So we are trying to counsel our clients to understand that, and not to say you don't need to do this solar or wind project, but you need to understand how that might happen, what that company might do, and how can you provide yourself a remedy. In other words, can you get a bigger payments up front? Can you make sure that you have money set aside from the money that comes in so that you can clean the mess up if there's a problem with it in the future? Just ways to decrease the risk to your farm or to your land that they may just abandon this project, because again, most of these agreements have provisions that say we can assign this lease or this document, these rights in your land, to anybody we want. If we look at history, we see where the government put interstate highways and state roads through. We saw where railroads came through, coal bed, methane, coal companies. I don't see any of those situations where it was beneficial to the farmer long term. We ended up with flooding problems. We ended up with salt water on top of the ground, or places that won't grow anything, etc. I don't see any difference here that the farmer's going to be left holding the bag, or the landowner will be left holding the bag if they're not careful. So, reviewing these contracts and trying to get an understanding of what your risks are and how can you mitigate or maybe avoid some of those risks. That's, to me, the key advantage here. The other thing that we see in these contracts is a confidentiality provision where nobody can talk to anybody, and it's a violation. That's a difficult position to be in, because I have clients who have gotten literally 4 or 5 offers from different companies, and they could range from
You can't confidentially negotiate your own contract. That never even crossed my mind on that
right.
confidentiality. I'm thinking the confidentiality is that you can't badmouth them to your neighbor, but yet the confidentiality is you can't say I've got 4 or 5 different offers and again negotiate.
Right. And you also can't tell the neighbor let's say the neighbor has Acme Solar and you have a contract with Acme Solar. You can't even tell your neighbor what the terms of your contract are, financially or otherwise, and they can't tell you what theirs is because these companies want to be able to negotiate individually with each of the landowners to cut the best deal they can for themselves. So your neighbor may be getting twice as much as you and you don't even know it.
And is there teeth in that for the solar companies to hold up on that confidentiality? Because I'm just looking at this as a lay person to say, I wouldn't even, the full understanding the full magnitude of that confidentiality to not be able to talk to your neighbor or your kids or whoever that is. And that's interesting.
Yeah, there's some teeth in that. Again, it depends on how the documents are written because there's a lot of different contracts out there. But in general, they're trying to do is to prevent them from having to pay the next guy more and the next guy more and the next guy more until they can't afford to do it because the coffee shop gossip has disclosed all their terms. So, I understand the business idea behind what they're trying to do. But it makes it very difficult for a farmer without having the benefit of counsel or tax advisors to make a good decision or to make an informed decision on whether that contract is really something that is acceptable and standard within the industry or whether they're kind of getting the short end of the stick.
And that's interesting because they'll go around and they'll tell, hey, your neighbor signed up for this. Your neighbor signed up for this. So they're putting the pressure on by putting that the neighbor signed up for this and those neighbors haven't signed up for it. So that's interesting that they would put a provision in there as such, but then use it as a leverage when they're talking to them or the pressure point,
Yeah, it's kind of the Billy Bob Thornton thing right now, the landman deal.
Yeah.
Those are the ways that this has always been done historically. And even if your neighbor has signed up, the contract that they sign probably says they can't disclose that terms of that to the neighbor, or perhaps even admit they signed up. Now, most of these places will record a memorandum of that contract. So if they lease that contract, or if they lease a piece of land, or they've got a contract or an option to buy it for some reason, they will record a memorandum with the county, which then at least as to the memorandum, that information is obviously public and can be discussed. But the specific terms of how much you're getting paid and when you're getting paid and what the escalators might be and your amounts are being paid, all that stuff's going to remain confidential.
We will definitely continue on to help educate our clients to get them to and our friends and family as well. Because that's one of those we personally get solar requests for land that we own also. So that's something we will push out to make sure that those are reviewed on there. The other thing that you
think about it
brought
from
up,
the opposite way. You guys are also in the real estate industry. What's that land worth if it has a solar option or a wind option on it? Is it worth more or is it worth less? I work with a lot of land and a lot of appraisers, and I don't know that there is a consensus yet of whether the land is worth more or less, depending on the company that has the contract. And even if it's built and operational, does it still add value to the land long term, or is that a detriment? It's going to be a lot of different opinions in the appraisal industry until I think this industry matures a little bit more.
Well, one of the things that are hitting also is that home in the country, right? Next thing you know, that home in the country is got solar all around it, or it's being sold and they didn't disclose that a farmer or that solar's coming around it, right? So it's getting sold in the meantime, and they know that solar's coming in. They might have even had a good neighbor payment by the solar company, which probably they can't disclose that solar's coming in because they had a good neighbor. That's part of the disclosure. So They sign and didn't tell anybody. The next person buys it. Next thing you know, he's living next to a solar company, and he paid in a bidding war for that land or for that property, home in the country. And so he paid top dollar for it, not knowing he was going to be covered by solar the next year. So it's been interesting watching some of these things happen, you know?
Yeah, it's going to get really interesting. Going back to what you guys talked about earlier about articles, I wrote an article on this about disclosures and the disclosure of the right to farm laws and the Farm Nuisance Act laws and things like that in various states. And some states have a very unique disclosure requirement for, I think, for example, Alaska, you have to disclose those types of things. So you don't have a situation where somebody comes from the city, they buy 5 acres in the country, and then they get mad because you have dust and noise, et cetera, flies from farming and things like that. But nobody's thought about that yet, Brenda. The situation is you may also be looking out your front window at reflection from solar towers, or you may be looking at a windmill across the road from you. None of that stuff has been disclosed. There's technically, I don't believe, any requirement yet in Illinois that it be disclosed.
Yeah, we've ran into it a little bit, and we've been asking, and they said, well, you don't have to disclose what your neighbor's doing with the property. But
Yeah.
then you also received a payment to be quiet about what the neighbor's doing. So it did affect something, you know? So I don't know. It's definitely interesting.
And that's what we're seeing is I've watched some auction, some ground sale at auction that had the solar options on it, as well as also the solar, the in place solar. So those have actually the ones that I saw with the options that I've actually personally experienced. Those pieces actually sold for less because the solar option was on them, and that farmer or that. It wasn't an investor. It's not solid enough for the investor to buy and pay a premium. So if the local farmer, the guy that owns next door, is interested in the land, but was not interested in the solar option. So that's only been about 3 of those that I've been to or watched to try to see what was really going on with them. So that is now the ones that have had it fully in function. Those did go to investors that basically were buying a lease. Didn't really care about the land. It was just a matter of a number and a return number as far as where those go. So, but not to digress, but the question I got is back to this bond, because I really believed that that these solar companies had to put a bond up. And I just had this conversation last night at a crop insurance meeting that bond is there. So you're saying that at what point does that bond have to be put up, or you just mentioned that bond may not ever be there?
Well, there's a lot of different requirements again, and it's hard for any individual landowner to get good information sometimes. So some counties have a requirement that certain bonds be put in place. Some contracts require the company to put a bond in place. Some of the contracts allow the company to put one bond in place for multiple projects or multiple areas. Some county ordinances do the same thing and allow one bond for multiple areas.
Oh, shit.
So unless you know exactly what those terms and provisions are, it's hard to even make a decision. It's also hard to figure out what is it going to cost to decommission and remove all of the so-called improvements, the solar or the wind projects, in 25 or 30 years from now. It's impossible to know. I mean, we do know right now that it's very difficult to recycle the windmill parts, especially the blades. There's really no place to do that. And as I understand it, they're burying them right now. The same kind of thing is true for solar panels, although they're making inroads into ways to salvage those and reuse them. Right now, I don't believe there's any significant way to recycle those materials. So at this point, the decommissioning is kind of a pie in the sky thing to start with anyway. Trying to figure out what that might be in the future, whether there's a bond to cover it or whether that bond is adequate, it's really going to be difficult, even for an advanced CPA to figure something like that out and what the likely risk might be.
And what I've asked my county commissioners, because I think they get every 5 years to get to relook at that bond and what is the cost, is something like that. But whose job is that? Who's got that on their calendar that they're going to do it? And who actually is going to understand how much that is, that they're supposed to be reevaluating that and asking for more money every so many years. Who's actually doing that? And the answer is always the
Good
same.
question.
That's something that's going to be slipping through the cracks. If you don't have the answers to that, that's going to be slipping through the cracks. So
Yeah, and by the same token, as with the solar companies themselves, the bond company also might look at this and say, okay, well, we've got some bond risk here as these projects age, and what we're going to do is create a subsidiary entity. We're going to put all of the bond liabilities we have into Solar Liability Company A, and as soon as we start to get claims, we're just going to file bankruptcy and let them fight over the money. That's what happens in the past and what's happened before, and I see no reason they won't do that again, because in the business world, that's good business. That's how they do things. The problem with that is it's very difficult for me as an attorney or for a landowner to calculate that risk into signing a contract now that might not cause problems until my son, till I'm long gone and my son is in charge of the farming operation, and he just says, "What the heck did Dad do? I don't even know what he did."
mm-hmm.
Wow, that is this is the information that really needs to be out there for people to be thinking about that are signing up for these solar leases. And I'm looking at it thinking, okay, my simple mind was that, okay, well, it's up to 50 years and that's 2 generations, and that ground won't ever be farmed again after you remove 2 generations. They don't even know how to farm anymore. But
Yeah.
So that's just my idea, but all of these other things that you're bringing up is that people really need to be, and all they're doing is they're looking at the dollars and not being able to weigh out all of those pros and cons as far as that goes, and even with we've dealt with, like, say, Farm Bureau I don't believe has done a good job of putting out the information and doing the pros and cons and educating their farmers on what to watch for. So the solar, if we can get into that, but let's go into if you could go into some do you do some estate planning and things like that, and progressions and how to get that farm from one generation to the next, especially in Illinois with that?
Yeah, we do a lot of succession planning, we call it. Whether it's business planning, transition of the business to the next generation while people are alive, or, as you said, estate planning after people are deceased. How do we get those assets or businesses moved to the next generation? Illinois is unique to a degree because we have what they call decoupled from the federal rule. So in the federal sense, a person's estate can be worth about $15 million now, and there's no tax. So a husband and wife with a proper planning could protect $30 million from a federal estate tax. In Illinois, we don't follow that number. We have decoupled, and we have picked the number of $4 million each. So in Illinois, a husband and wife can only have $8 million with proper planning in general, to avoid paying estate taxes in Illinois, which is generally about 5%, I believe. So you're looking at a potentially significant number if a family has a lot of acreage or has been very successful. There are ways to get around those things by using some estate planning loopholes, I guess we'll call them, that the federal government has come up with in structuring the farming operation or the ownership of the land, either in multiple companies, LLCs, trusts, irrevocable trust, or a couple things that you'll love. One of them is called an intentionally defective trust. So your lawyer's going to create something that's intentionally defective that makes people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And then you can create a trust with something called crummy powers. So I'm also going to create a trust for you that the powers are just crummy, but the intentionally defective trust isn't really defective, but it has provisions in it that will intentionally take advantage of certain IRS code provisions that will give you a tax advantage. And
Wow.
A crummy trust is not a crummy trust. It was something that was developed by some rich family named Crummy, who was challenged by the IRS, and they won. So they now call them crummy powers because that's the family that created it. It just so happens that it doesn't give the client very much confidence in the lawyer when you tell them you're going to create a defective trust that's crummy, you know.
That is
Yeah.
it. A defective trust that's crummy.
Yeah,
That's
but using
that,
those types of things and a lot of other planning options that can be used that will allow families to pass on more than the $8 million or the $30 million worth of assets and property. It just gets tricky, and quite honestly, it gets very expensive because you've got to have an accountant or a CPA that's very well versed in these things, and it's a lot of calculations and a lot of tax planning that has to go into that, for which you need a really powerful, highbrow accountant.
well, and it's becoming more and more important because as the value of with the inflation, everything's more expensive, and you get up to those numbers a lot quicker than people actually think about or really imagine. That's there. And then the other one that I actually, a lot of times, from what I hear, people don't put into account is that your life insurance is part of that in those numbers. Would you agree?
It can be if you don't have proper planning, you know. So typically, as long as you set your life insurance up properly, it will pass outside of that number and outside of probate, etc. And you can use that to your advantage. But if you don't plan properly, you can end up with life insurance. You can end up with any account that has a beneficiary designation option. You could end up with that in your estate or then in your spouse's estate at a later date and subject those things to tax that otherwise you could have gotten passed on to the next generation without any tax. So the planning is very important in today's world, especially like you said, the price of land has gone, you know, it used to be if you're a farmer and you own 400 acres, you weren't having much problems. But with the price of land, 400 acres might be worth $6 million. Well, that's more than the $4 million they can protect. Now we have a problem, and we need to do a lot of planning just for, and somewhat complex planning, even for someone who only has 400 acres.
Yep. Well, that sounds like that's a whole nother. That sounds like this planning might be a whole nother episode if that's one of those things, because that we can really get in depth on, because there's not a lot of knowledge out there of what's going on, and to be able to give people the ideas and the thoughts, the thought process to say, okay, what do I even need to be thinking about? So that's where I think a lot of the common people are the average, or whatever we want to refer to ourselves as, is the uneducated. That basically that there's a lot that we need to be educated on.
Yeah, and the difficulty with the succession planning type things is that there's really no one size fits all. You know, there are, and I'm not going to say these are bad. I'm just saying there are law firms and companies out there that provide a kind of one size fits all. You know, they've got a computer program, they check the box, you talk with them, they print out all the documents, you sign them, and there you go, you have an estate plan. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that as your operation, whether it's a business or a farm or what have you, as that gets more complicated and you have more ideas about what you need to do, those types of, I'm going to say, standardized form documents probably will not get you where you want to go safely. It's going to be an ongoing meet once a year, talk with your lawyer and your tax advisor and your banker all in one room, and make sure you're still on that same path. We have a lot of clients that we do that with is to just make sure all your professionals understand where you're at and make sure we're still all headed and helping you get to the same location at the end.
And the people that do that, are they, I mean, I guess it's your average Joe, right? I mean, some people
Yeah.
you'd be surprised that really need to take the time and do that and put it on the calendar and do it every year as far
Yeah.
as that goes. How to get them to that point of, well, I don't need to do it today. I don't need to do it today. As long as it's on the calendar, you're going to get it done. So I guess you make that appointment and you get it done. What's your suggestion?
Yeah, we try to do that, and I'll give you some perspective. We had a client who is a widow, and she has, I'm going to say, about 6,000, a little over 6,000 acres that she owns, and it's all paid for. And we were trying to, and this has been 5 or 6 years ago, we're putting a plan together for her to try to help her get control of that and to try to avoid as much tax as we can. She spent a lot of money. She probably spent $150,000 on her accountant, but he saved her $7.5 million in tax. And she was smart enough to say, hey, how about if I write you a check for another 150, can you save me another $7 million in tax? So she was on it. But that's kind of the approach you have to take if you're doing the planning. If you are a farmer or a business owner and you have amassed that kind of an estate, it's going to cost you some money to take advantage of all the tax loopholes that are out there. But if you do it right, you're going to save yourself a lot of money, and you're going to pass a lot more value and assets onto your family, and the hard work that you put in is going to bear fruit.
Hiring the right people to steer the
Yeah.
ship, help steer the ship. Yeah.
All right. Well, like I say right now, so where we're at is, like I said, we appreciate you coming on, Jeff, and we appreciate your insight. I hope to have you back sometime in the future. But where we're at is, I think we're at the place where we're supposed to round up on time. So we appreciate it, and then look forward to talking to you in the future and the knowledge and insight that you had, and we'll keep sending you clients.
Okay, I appreciate it, guys. Good to talk to you. Have a good weekend.
You
All
too.
right, you too.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
All right. Bye. Thank you for joining us today on the Peddler Perspective. If today's episode sparked a thought, a smile, or new idea, share it with someone who'd enjoy the ride. Until next time, we'll be here working the land, serving our clients, and bringing you more stories worth hearing.